Hey friends, it's Pride Month, and you know what that means? It's time to buy the queer and trans folks in your life all the pizza, coffee, and cute stuffed animals they want. Melina's already stepped up to the plate this week, and we love and appreciate you dearly, Melina. Who's next? If you want to do your part, head to patreon.com/thegaytheistmanifesto and consider a donation as little as $1 per episode to support what we do on the show. Thanks, loves. Your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. This is the Gay Theist Manifesto. Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to the Gay Theist Manifesto. I am your host, Callie Wright, joined once more by the mega awesome Ari Stillman. What's up, Ari?
Well, I'm becoming increasingly convinced that there needs to be some sort of test you need to pass if you're a cis-het person in our society to be allowed to live.
Oh my God! Let's not beat around the bush here.
Yeah.
Ari, tell us how you really feel.
Cis genocide. I'm getting more and more serious about it every passing moment.
Like honestly, yeah. I mean,
I woke up yesterday, which was the 2nd of June, the second day of Pride Month, and I'm like, are they done yet? Have they got it out of their system?
And the answer is no. They haven't.
It'll probably take a few more days at least.
That's just plain not a thing that happens. And this week we have a special guest co-host, our dear friend, Marissa Alexa McCool. Welcome, love.
It's good to be on the Gay Theist for the first time. I've heard you guys have a decent reputation, but I'm still feeling it out.
It's fine. We'll work hard to prove ourselves to you, I promise, since this is a very new experience for all of us. So Marissa has a new book out, and it has a thing I wrote in it. Hooray, right? So we're going to spend some time talking about how awesome the book is, because it is, and why you should go buy it right now. And then we're going to spend some time talking about how super fucking complicated lots of folks' feelings around pride are. So let's hear about the new book. Give us the dish.
Okay, so a lot of people who followed my work know that the Vagina Monologues at Penn was a big deal for me, not just because it was my first public appearance, and I was the first trans person in 17 years of that show to be in the show, but I went back this year as an alumni spotlight speaker, and I got to perform my own piece. But what I noticed while I was there was that of the 70 women who were in the show, I was the only trans person, and I didn't even go to that school. And that the trans monologue that's in the show, which is problematic at best, was being performed by cis people. And I noticed the same thing last year when I was sitting on the stage having just performed my small bit part, and everybody's watching the trans monologue and like looking at me, then looking at them.
And physical look, like, wait a minute.
But then there's the fact that there were maybe 10 women of color. It was definitely not majority. It was definitely not even close. And one of them specifically, her name is Megana Nalajera, and she was talking about how she didn't feel welcome in that space, and she didn't feel like she was represented by this show. And if trans women are barely represented in the show, NBs and trans men, and especially, trans men who have vaginas, like, they're not represented at all. The only time they're even mentioned is in the beginning when they very specifically say women and people with vaginas. So I started examining a lot of that and noticing that, once again, I don't want to say the Vagina Monologues is a bad piece. It's really not, but it's also a little bit out of date because we're sitting there with college students and there's nothing about social media, online bullying, school shootings. And like I said, the trans piece is, it makes me feel a little, it makes me feel. and then, yeah, and I heard all the women of color who were like, yeah, I don't feel welcome here. I don't feel like this show represents me. So, I'm joking with Megana going, we should start our own Vagina Monologues with blackjack and hookers. And then it was like, wait, why don't we do that? So I said, I'm going to start this book and I want you to write the foreword and I'll write out to people and, we'll make this piece monologues for people who are queer, trans, and or of color. So those were
the non-specific genital monologues.
Well, we ended up calling it a series of monologues from the previously unheard, which I felt encompassed a lot of that. But, I reached out to other trans people. I think it's about half trans. And, I reached out to people of color, a Two-Spirit activist, Mandisa Thomas, Princess Harmony, who's a Latinx trans woman. And, just so many different people reached out to me. This was I always have pieces compiled in my books, but this was the first time people who I didn't know reached out to me. And one was a trans woman who was in Vietnam. So, telling the story of being in Laos and, spending the night with a sex worker and realizing that they were a woman, but it was the 70s. And that didn't,
Right.
Yeah. And unlike the vagina monologues, which once again, I'm not saying is a bad piece, I decided instead of me interpreting their experience and writing it myself, I would reach out to as many people to have them tell their own story in their own words, because I didn't feel like that was happening enough. I didn't feel like the quintessential women of color story in the show should be called Coochie Snorcher. You know what I mean?
Yikes! I didn't know that was a thing.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a little dated, and credit to her for doing an interview with Penn the week before saying that maybe she needs to update it, but even more credit to Megana, who said, hey, maybe you should let other people speak now. So
Right.
I definitely had to include her. She is a badass, and as we were working on the book, she won the Fulbright scholarship, so she's going places, and pretty soon I will be the second name on this book, and she will be like international activist or something. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, and so I read through the PDF you gave me of the book, and one thing that I kept saying to myself, and I don't know, maybe this is a compliment, maybe it's not, but I keep in all of the pieces that you write, your writing voice sounds exactly like my internal monologue.
That's just because we are so close, Callie.
Yeah, well, it just literally, it almost and maybe it's me painting the cadence that words go through in my head, but as I'm reading it, I'm just like, gosh, that sounds like the things that I think to myself when I'm laying in bed and trying to think deep thoughts and pondering my life. I just keep thinking God, this sounds exactly like the shit that goes through my head, and that's I don't know, maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a reason we became close. I'll just say that.
That's
It's
fair.
because you
That's
have
fair.
the same haircut and the same glasses, and even though Callie's not wearing flannel right now, that's a rarity. So,
Right? Yeah, I dropped the ball on that one, so I apologize to everyone.
Less
I'm
sad.
super, super sorry.
Flannel's going great with my rainbow striped socks, though.
ew.
I am just failing at all levels. I just have these really generic athletic ankle socks on. I am so not gay right now, aside from my swoopy side shave haircut. So you came prepared with some readings?
Sure. I want to read Bethany's piece first because it's just freaking adorable. Hers is called My Mark 1 is Jealous. And like I said, it's about being jealous of science vaginas. Here's the thing. My Mark 1 is standard issue. A perfectly normal vagina. Sure, we're friends and all. We do the hand mirror hangout regularly. I like making her happy and she likes it too. We both like visits from our partner, and we have been content for a very long time. Lately, however, she's been dissatisfied with herself. I have tried to explain to her that she's beautiful just the way she is and doesn't need to change a thing. My partner tells her that she is wonderful. I have spent evenings and mornings comforting her, but it seems nothing will change her mind. She's jealous. Since she learned of Shiny's new science vaginas, my Mark 1 feels left out. Why can't we be shiny and new, she asks me, and I struggle to help her understand. We were born this way, I say, and there are other people who were not born this way, though they should have been. There are women everywhere who were born with other pieces that just don't match up, and they need the option to be confirmed, just like we were at birth. Other women need to be able to choose to have a companion just like I have had my whole life. No matter how I explain it, she still doesn't understand. They will never be newer and better, she tells me. They will be perfect, and we will not. But you are perfect, I respond each time. You are perfect, and you just don't understand. We won the genetic lottery. I got to have you in my life from the moment I was born, and I have loved you every moment with you. And yet, Though she has never actually seen a shiny new science vagina, she just knows they're better than she is. They're technologically improved, built by loving hands, and she was formed in the womb by some chemicals. The tech has to make them better, does it not? Oh, sweet Mark 1, of course not. Just because they are shiny and new doesn't mean that they are better or worse. It means they are the same. This is why surgery exists, because inside these women are the same as we are, and they deserve the chance to be on the outside too. They should be confirmed as who they are just like we are every day. They should not be discriminated against by potential partners or governments or business owners or employers or anyone. They are the same. Not better or worse. Beautiful women everywhere, just like us, who deserve love and homes and jobs and friendship. They are shiny and wonderful, just as we are. Don't you want them to feel shiny and wonderful? Don't you want them to feel affirmed? Shouldn't they get to choose their options, which makes them feel right? They are our friends and family members. They are our partners and loved ones. They are just like us, and their shiny new science vaginas are just like you, Mark 1. But hell if I can convince her.
That's so good.
It's adorable.
Cute.
Yeah, although I've had lots of sort of the reverse of that conversation in my head, like, will mine ever be good enough?
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh.
So this is my piece that I want to share. This is called Boy Meets Girl. Imagine where that title came from.
Right?
It took me 13 years to come out. 13 years before I came out is when I got the name Marissa. That was 3 years after my girlfriends in high school put makeup on me for the first time. Then a second time. Then every day until a guy named Jesse called me a fag and beat me up in the bathroom. I stopped doing it then. That was 2 years after my late friend Lindsay asked me to wear her clothes and took a picture. I pretended it was funny. Secretly, it made me feel alive in a way that I hadn't known I felt vacant. Not in an adrenaline rush kind of way, but in the I'm actually a person who exists kind of way. Vacant is how I lived, slowly introducing my other half named Marissa to all my girlfriends. The few who knew would check with me to see if they were cool with Marissa and wouldn't let me get serious if she wasn't. I had good friends, but it wasn't enough. When I yelled in Pastor Carl's face, some people think the fuck you was at him. They're wrong. Within those words were years of fear that led me to suppress who I was. Fear of losing every single person I loved, knew, and would ever meet. Fear of never seeing my kids again. Fear of never being worthy of love. Fear of never passing enough. Fear that my family would disown me. Fear that I would be alone. I lived for most of my life as a vacant shell that other people called a name and pronoun that chipped away at what was left of my heart. Every he that should have been a she, every handsome that should have been a pretty, every suit that should have been a dress, every time my mother asked me what was wrong. Even when I admitted that I had been raped, I could not bring myself to tell her that I was really her daughter. Deep inside, I don't think she'd ever believe me. Outside of all the people who already knew, my husband watched as every single night I'd cry myself to sleep, hating what I saw in the mirror and wanting to thaw the numbness that buried everything I ever wanted. He dried every tear for years before most people knew who I was. When I came out, everything I ever wanted in life came true, but you also have to understand the anxiety that came along with the decision to live authentically. I spent so much time in so many places. Each person I told, every time I spoke up to correct someone, the letters and messages I sent, the conversations I had to anticipate the worst in case it happened. Most times it didn't. But then I see some center lord lamenting free speech or special snowflakes because we have the audacity to not put up with your mistakes like you got a hobby wrong, because it's a mild inconvenience to them and much easier to write everyone off than consider someone else's agency. I see that and compare it with every anxiety attack I had before I told every person in my life, including some who no longer are. For anything I've lost, by facing that anxiety, I've gained more than I could have ever hoped to know. I have thousands of affirming, loving, and supportive people in my life, and it's because I went through every one of those anxiety attacks and told everyone the truth, eventually. And I keep telling those stories so that one day a young trans kid can tell everyone they know, and hopefully they can react as nonchalantly as my own children did, with a shrug and asking why we didn't tell them sooner. It was worth it. It was always worth it. I'd rather be a sensitive, triggered T-word snowflake than ever exist vacant and unauthentic ever again.
God, I feel that so hard. Part of the reason that piece in particular sort of sticks with me is the the idea of authenticity. And I think for a lot of us, it takes time to unpack who our authentic selves actually are. Like, I imagine this is an experience for a lot of people, but it's something in particular that I've been experiencing is like who I who I see my authentic self is now is different than I saw it 2, 3, 4 years ago when I first came out. And I mean, obviously it's okay for those things to change, right? So like I could just be changing. It may not necessarily be that I'm uncovering things like, oh, this is who I always was and I just didn't know it. Like maybe I'm just changing, and that's okay too. But I definitely feel now a more of a sense of authenticity than I ever have. And it kind of goes back to the conversation that I was having where I was like, you know, maybe I'm non-binary. I don't know. And what I was doing, I guess, was just sort of exploring who I am without the context of man, woman, et cetera, et cetera. Like, who am I? Right. And as I've done that exploration, I've found that like, I'm not quite as femme a woman as I initially imagined myself to be. And so again, like, you know, maybe that really was who I was, and I've just, my preferences and likes and things have changed. But I definitely have a sense of uncovering a different side of myself that like was actually there, but was suppressed by societal expectations or my need for others to see me a certain way, and sort of doing the performative femininity as opposed to being like, you know, cutting my hair shorter or like wearing jeans and t-shirts and tank tops all the time instead of dresses, and not doing my makeup very often and that kind of stuff. Like all of the stuff that like I felt was authentically me, but maybe was just me like trying to signal so everyone will like, yeah, like my pronouns are she, like you should just assume that about me because look at all of the feminine things I'm doing, you know? And so, yeah, that's something that sticks with me because I've been thinking a lot lately about the idea of, you know, who your authentic self is, and whether you can separate your authentic self from the context that you live in. Like how much of that is informed by your societal programming and how much of it is just like who you innately are. And like, is it even possible to separate the two? I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we as trans people generally have to immediately start out by negotiating. So I know everyone doesn't have this experience, but a lot of us had to be, I'm trans, but don't worry, I'm not getting the surgery, or don't worry, you don't have to change the pronoun. Like we immediately start negotiating before they have the chance to reject us. So as we transition, there's a lot of pressure to appear in a way that will get us regarded correctly, not in the way that feels authentic to ourselves. So once we get to a certain level of transition, and once again, I'm speaking only from my own experience, we start to reevaluate and we go, well, I don't really like this, but does that mean if I don't wear this dress that people won't think I'm a woman? And then you kind of realize I am a woman and I'm wearing a dress, or, you know, I'm just as much of a woman as when I'm wearing a t-shirt. And I've had trouble at work recently because my boss continues to accidentally call me sir. I started wearing makeup at work for the specific reason that I was hoping he wouldn't do that. Right. And you know, I've been there 8 months and he said, "Thank you, sir," to me. And I was like, really? You've never known me as anything else. How are you still fucking this up? And he decided to respond to me asking him not call me sir by calling me man. So he'll say, "Have a good weekend, man." And
bro.
Yeah. And
missing the point.
Yeah. And it was,
God.
And this is, you know, we've talked about how families sometimes react like this. I didn't even say anything. And he immediately started with the whole, "Oh, I say that to everybody." It's like, yeah, you call your wife man? I don't think you do. I think you're full of shit.
Yep. Absolutely. And you know, you say that, and I don't know that I realized I was doing this, but I was totally doing this because if I go back and I read the letter that I wrote to just like post to Facebook to sort of come out to everyone, there's like 2 or 3 paragraphs where I'm like trying to reassure everyone, like, no, I'm mostly the same person, right? Like I'm still a Star Trek nerd and I still like emo music and like all of that stuff. And it's like, God, I don't know. And you know, maybe for some people that's true and that's okay. But like maybe for some people, like, no, I am radically changing who I am, or at least radically changing the outward performance of who I am, you know, on like pulling back the mask and like, you know, so who I am isn't actually changing, at least not to myself, but like you're going to see a completely different person because I've been hiding the most essential parts of myself to, so as not to be discovered, quote unquote. That's like, wow, that's a huge realization I just had. Like, I didn't even realize that I was doing that, but like, that's totally what that was.
I was podcasting before I transitioned, but the numbers weren't even close. And I also happened to write a really relevant topical book at about the same time. So I would say 95% of the people in my life now did not know me before transition. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them always say, well, I've always seen you this way, or, you seem like you're not going through anything difficult. It's like, yeah, you didn't see the 13 years it took me to go from being named Marissa to coming out publicly. So you get kind of an unfair idea. It's like, I didn't come out of the fucking box this way. But there's also, our outward presentation. And when I came out, I did the same thing. It's still me. And then recently I realized, no, it wasn't. It was not even close. Like the person I put out for the world, I even had an ex-girlfriend say this because she was dating me and then went back and listened to the old episodes of the podcast. And she was like, I like you, but that person was kind of an asshole. And it's like, wow.
Yeah. And I don't know. And I mean, I think in a lot of ways, an experience like that can't not change you in some pretty essential ways. I think, I mean, obviously everyone's experience is different. Maybe some people really didn't change at all aside from the outward presentation. Like that's all valid. But like, I can't help but think like, I mean, I can look back at some super essential, like very basic ways that I have changed, and my view of the world has changed, my view of life has changed, my view of myself has changed. And I can't help but wonder, like in that thought experiment where everybody's like, oh, if you could talk to yourself from 10 years ago, what would you say? And like, and I think back to myself, okay, in 2008, where was I? What was I doing? Like I think that was like the tail end of when I was playing in bands and, still traveling a little bit, playing music. And I was trying to remember my experience of myself as that person and thinking like, would I recognize me as myself? Because like we all experience those gradual changes of ourselves, right? So like, every day we're a little different, but the change is incremental, so we don't necessarily see it happening on a day-to-day basis. But like taking that snapshot of yourself from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, like would I even recognize the person I was? Like that would be a really interesting thing to do if I could.
Yeah, I'd recommend it. Go back and read some of the old stuff you wrote and realize how much of it was just what you were putting out so that people wouldn't see. And I know, Ari, you've been through that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a different experience being non-binary in the sense that, my gender is in my lifetime most likely not going to be recognized by people that I come across, who are strangers who don't know me. So it's always kind of this balancing act between what is my authentic self, and then how do I portray myself in a way that's going to get me read as my authentic self, or is that even possible? And a lot of times it's not possible. Because, your general person, your server at a restaurant is not going to look at me and correctly assume that my pronouns are they. I mean, maybe they would, but it's kind of weird to assume people's pronouns by the way they look anyway. So I don't know if I want to do that. But yeah, I mean, it has been a long process. Like when I first realized that I was non-binary, I didn't want to change my name. I kind of messed with pronouns a little bit, but not too much. And there was also like safety issues with, my family and stuff. So there were certain people that I could tell and certain people that I couldn't, just for the safety purpose. But, as time went on, I started, becoming more comfortable, I guess. I don't know if more comfortable is the word, but just kind of coming into what it was that I really wanted and what it was that I needed without as much regard for, making it difficult for other people or anything like that. So, I fooled around more with pronouns and decided to change my name and eventually started taking testosterone. And I don't know if it's that I changed as a person or if I realized that what I thought I wanted was different from what I really wanted. It's, yeah, like you said, it's kind of hard to tell looking back on it. I definitely, I still do a lot of the whole like, well, it's not anybody's fault if they misgender me because they don't know. A lot of people don't even know non-binary is a thing, so I shouldn't get, upset about that. And then I do sometimes make choices in my presentation to make it myself appear more androgynous, or something I mentioned before is my hair. Like, I kind of miss having long hair. I haven't had long hair in many years. But as soon as it starts kind of growing out more, I get a little bit dysphoric about it. And I'm like, I miss the feeling of like tying it back and playing with it. And I love, men with long hair is totally my thing. And, I'm not a man, but I'm trans masculine. So I would love to have that kind of look. But just because of, my stature, I'm 5'1", 100 pounds. I don't get gendered as masculine very often. I do sometimes. But it would just give people another excuse to think that I'm not genuine, even though that's what I would like. Although, there's also the whole thing that once my hair starts growing out, I'm like, it feels gross. Take it off.
Right. I'm sweating now. I don't like this.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe this is pretty unique on my part, but I am involved with a disproportionately large amount of non-binary people. That there was one that I've spent a lot of time with, and maybe because I'm poly, spent more time with than's PG rated, but they were still using binary pronouns. And because of my partner, Devin, because of you, Ari, because of so many people that I'm around that use they, them, I was like, I'm uncomfortable calling you she because you're non-binary and transmasculine. This is messing with me. I don't know how to react to that. So they were like, well, you can use they, them for me. That's fine. And I'm just like, thank you. That makes it like, that's a weird position to be in, to be like,
Yeah.
I want to use they, them pronouns and you don't want me to. This is the reverse of normal.
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you talk about that, Ari, because that's one of the hesitations that I had with cutting my hair and making my hair shorter is like, my long hair framed my face in a specific way that made it look pretty feminine. And like, I'm at a point in my life now where like I get gendered correctly most of the time, like to the point where it's actually kind of weird if people don't anymore. And I thought like, I'm going to cut my hair short and that's going to stop. And like, that was immediate. It wasn't dysphoric in the sense of like, this is going to be a look that I don't like from a gender standpoint, but it was dysphoric from the fact of like, people are going to start misgendering me a lot now. And I'm going to hate that, even though this is something that I desperately want for myself from an appearance standpoint. And it's like having to, again, it's, having to sort of change yourself to navigate society in a ways that lots of people don't understand.
Which sucks, because how do you present as non-binary? That's not really
Right.
a thing you can do.
Exactly.
All I can do is just hopefully choose, clothes and hairstyles and whatever else that I like and that makes me feel good. But sometimes it can be difficult to do that, especially me being very small. I have a limited amount of clothing options. So I just got to
need to get you a neon sign to wear on your shoulders. Just says non-binary and they, them, and like big flashing lights.
Yeah, the real life equivalent of the Facebook frame.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Well, before we switch gears and start talking about Pride, Rissy, tell us where we can go to find the book. Remind us the title once more.
The title is Once Unspoken, a series of monologues from the previously unheard. You can find it on Amazon, or I will send the direct link that you can get it from me, and I sign every copy. And generally, Aiden and Pris will sign copies too because they contributed. And we also have a live show coming up in Chicago in a couple weeks, June 23rd at the Den Theater, episode 150 of the Inciting Incident podcast. We will have Alex Jules, Mandisa Thomas, Jenica Crail, and Stephanie Zvan as our guests, and hopefully a lot of other people to make it another mini atheist convention sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. I will have links to all of those things in the show notes. You should definitely get this book. It's very good, even aside from the fact that I have a thing in it. There's lots of really, really important perspectives in there. The writing is just good from an aesthetic standpoint. It's a very pleasurable read. Very important stuff. Very good stuff. So As we said earlier, it's Pride Month, and the cis are out in force.
And they're out of hand.
and yeah. So I have complicated feelings about Pride for lots of reasons. I've been thinking a lot lately about my first experience with Pride and my last experience with Pride. So my first experience with Pride was I was still very closeted. I was out to, I think, maybe 3 or 4 people in my life the first time I went to Pride. And I was there with a nonprofit that I helped found and used to work with. And we went to Pride just because, we wanted to be in a place where people we wanted to serve would be. And, so I went and, I didn't march in the parade. I watched the booth while everybody else was in the parade, but I saw people there living, laughing, existing, being happy. And that is one of the first things that really encouraged me and gave me the courage to say, like, wow, maybe I can do this. And maybe I can do this and actually have a happy, fulfilling life that's worth living. Because in my heart of hearts, I really doubted whether or not that was a thing that was possible. And going to Pride for the first time showed me, like, yeah, it actually is possible. You can do this and you can live happily and be fulfilled. And I came out to a whole bunch more people in my life that night because I was feeling very good about it. And I was feeling very emboldened and empowered. And it was only 2 or 3 months after that I came out to everyone in my life and started transitioning and started getting involved in the local community and started learning about some of the politics, which, if you pay attention at all, the politics are politics. And so for a quick minute, I was on the Pride Planning Committee in Cincinnati, and that literally involved me giving opinions about very small things. I don't want to take any credit for doing any actual organizing or anything like that. It was literally like I wrote a couple of things about my opinions on things. But nonetheless, I was in the Facebook group for the Pride Planning Committee for Cincinnati, and last year, they did this movie event in Washington Park, which is this big park in Cincinnati. And they did this movie event, and the star of the movie, whose name escapes me now, was someone who was super transphobic. And I don't mean transphobic in the said something unintentionally ignorant but hurtful way. I mean transphobic in the, like, trans people are gross way. And a couple of people obviously expressed concerns about that fact. And I watched in this Facebook group as basically they were just making fun of people who had concerns about this, like teeing, laughing. People are offended so easily these days, like all of that stuff that you normally hear. And I just sort of, sheepishly raised my hand with words, "Hey guys, the trans person's still here, remember?" And there was literally one person on the committee who took anything that I had to say seriously. And there was nothing they could do about it because it was like 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. They paid a whole bunch of money to license the movie and they couldn't change it. But, that was my thing, is I was like, could you at least acknowledge that this was an oversight, that you made a mistake, and maybe see if there's something that you can do about it? Because, like, that's a real bad look, guys. And this one person did, assuming that, what he said was true, he did, look into seeing if there was, something they could do differently, and they couldn't. But, like, that has just, and I don't want to say permanently, but definitely left a sore spot, a sour taste in my mouth about that whole thing. And I have heard lots and lots of similar stories from, people all across the country in the circles that I run in. For example, I saw someone on Facebook posting about how you're not allowed to bring, like, backpacks, bags, food, drinks of any kind or anything into Pride. So it's like, okay, so it's going to be 98 degrees outside. You're going to have your entire family with you, but you can't bring your own water. Oh, by the way, our bottles of water are $5 a piece. Happy Pride.
Right.
And there's this constant argument in the community about, like, we don't want a corporate pride, but we want a big party. But it's, the first Pride was a riot, and that's not just a slogan. It's an actual statement of fact. Pride has very radical activist roots, and it's largely turned into a giant corporate funded party. And there's lots of discourse around, like, whether that's a good thing, whether that's a bad thing. But it's really sad to me that so much of the conversation around pride is a whole lot of people saying, gosh, I don't know if it's for me. I don't know if I actually belong here. And so, I made a post on Facebook just asking folks, not even necessarily about pride, but just like, how you doing? What's on your mind? What are you struggling with? What are you excited about as Pride Month approaches? And wow, did people respond? Some very, very raw, vulnerable, honest thoughts about just people's lives in general, but also about pride specifically. Lots of very, very happy things, lots of very, very not happy things. And so, I'm interested in hearing, R.A. and Marissa, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about how you're feeling, just sort of a reflection on life at this point in time as we're in Pride Month, but also specifically about pride and your own experiences, if you have any.
I have never been better. I mean, I can't even say that with a hint of hyperbole. I have literally never been better. I live in an area that is super queer friendly, even has a magnitude of single-use gender-neutral bathrooms. I went to meet a friend because I'm making new friends even, and when I went to use the restroom, they were all gender neutral, and the only person who said anything to me was another woman who said, "I love your lipstick." And it's like, wow, this would not happen in most places in this country right now.
Yeah.
I live with 3 partners. Granted, moving one up here on 7 hours notice was not expected, but no regrets. And I still date, which confuses some people because I am an insatiable slut, and I'm finally okay with that. I've been finally put in a position where I can be open not only about being trans and queer, but about the fact that I am very sex positive and I have an unquenchable libido. And I go outside the house to still do that sometimes. But as far as pride goes, I don't have any good pride stories. Every time I have gone to pride, it's been a fucking disaster. And I don't think it's because of the whole, man, it's so corporate. Like, I'm not completely on that bandwagon, mostly because I don't think the worst thing in the world is that companies are associating themselves with us at a time that some people are looking for any way to discriminate against us. Mm-hmm. It's more, are you at Pride, pretending to be associated with us while, say, supporting legislation like RFRAs? Are you actually backing it up instead of just saying it and trying to court our dollar? But also, hey, you are trying to court our dollar and not saying don't come in our stores, queers. So it's mixed there, but like I went to 2 prides last year. One was in Salt Lake City, and I've told my experience many times that I was shouted slurs 20 times in maybe an hour of just walking the street. And then even Twin Cities Pride last year, I got called a sir while I'm there in a dress with a trans pride flag as a freaking cape. And it's like, really? So, and a lot of this may just be the fact that big groups of people tend to terrify me unless I'm on stage. Like, anybody who has seen me at a convention knows I will get up there and yell fuck for an hour when it's my turn to talk, but put me in the general crowd and I'm just like, hi, I'm Marissa. What?
Right.
So that's where I'm at. I'm at a point of euphoria in relationships, gender, sexuality, and just general openness. I live in a great house. My garden is great. Everything is amazing. My son just turned 11 yesterday, and my daughter turns 10 next week, so I'm more than halfway done. I can kick them the fuck out of the house before I turn 40, send them to college, and then we can get a cabin up north and just smoke and write all day. I am looking forward to that. Send them both to Penn, let them complain about Philadelphia, while me, Aiden, Devin, and Pris are all just smoking a joint, getting laid, and having shower thoughts while looking at the lake. I'm looking forward to that.
That sounds like literal heaven.
That's
like
life goals.
You may have just argued that heaven exists, because that's what it sounds like, honestly. All right, so Ari, talk to me. How you doing in general, and talk to me about your feelings about Pride.
I am excited for Pride Month, which is not really something that I've ever been before. I don't know if it's just because I've just been lack of motivation, not really caring that much about it. I'm excited mostly for the chance to make cis people mad, which is not something that I usually say. I'm usually very anti making people mad. But I'm actually having fun with it for the first time ever, which I think for many people, What was that?
I said, oh my God, same. You've seen the
Yeah.
screenshots.
Yeah. And I think I have the Sister Getting Out of Hand podcast to thank for helping me get my confidence in that sort of area. And I think for most people, they'd be like, what? But Ari, you are one of the good ones who didn't do that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, but I think I need to get more out of my comfort zone in that kind of area, because I have been for a long time very accommodating, very not wanting to offend anyone, holding back my opinions because I don't want people to be mad at me because, it's bad for my PTSD and all of that. But since I'm doing pretty well mental health wise for the most part, I've started to kind of come into my own as far as like having opinions and not being afraid to express them, and knowing that I'm right about something. And if somebody disagrees, it's not my problem that they're wrong kind of thing. So, it's only, we're recording this on the 3rd of June. So it's, only 3 days into Pride Month, but I'm looking forward to wrestling some more jimmies, which I've already done. I mean, not just for
Please
the sake of...
always use the phrase wrestling jimmies, by the way. Like, I need that to always be a thing you say.
Which I've already done a little bit of. Even, I didn't set out trying to offend people. I posted something on Facebook talking about allies, about how allies need to be careful about, claiming themselves allies when they're not actually doing anything and making it about them. And I got a few people who were a little bit hurt by that, which I found amusing because, as Kelly posted in a comment, it was one of the tamest ways I could have phrased it.
That's what I was like. I read that and I was like, it's an essentially Ari comment, right? It's very insightful, very true, very, it was still assertive, but it was, the tamest way that sentiment could be expressed. And I read that and I was like, good on you, Ari. That's a really, really good way of saying that. And still people coming out of the fucking woodwork. Like, what are you doing, guys?
Yeah. That was interesting. So, I'm proud of myself for like handling those things and not freaking out and, coming back and responding with, what I thought was the truth. And some people apparently disagreed. But yeah, so I'm excited to doing more visibility kind of stuff. Just kind of not taking any crap from people if I can avoid it. As far as, Pride events and Pride parades, as far as I can remember, I could be wrong about this because trauma brain, I've only been to one actual Pride parade, which was in Little Rock. It would have been in 2013 or 14, depending on which part of the year it was held in, because sometimes it's, it's all over the place. But I had a good experience. I didn't feel left out other than, only knowing a few people there who, were there with my school. I went with some people from the queer and trans and ally group from school, from college that I was going to at the time. But yeah, so no bad experiences really. I didn't feel that I was left out or anything. This year I have the chance to go to 3 prides if I want to. So the first one coming up in a few weeks is Denver Pride, which I'm looking forward to because, it's a big metropolitan area. So there's going to be a lot of activity, a lot of visibility going on. So I'm going to that. There's also Colorado Springs Pride, which is where I live and is a place that definitely needs to have a pride because it's a pretty conservative area. And then there's also Boulder Pride, and Boulder is like one of the queerest places. So depending on what kind of flavor of things I want to do, I can go to potentially 3 different prides. And so Denver Pride is the first one coming up in a few weeks. And I'm excited for it. I have a shirt, and I was thinking about this when you talked about Callie, and Marissa, you're talking about experiences at previous prides that you've been to. So the first, and as far as I can remember, only pride I've been to, I wore a shirt that says, "Ask me about my preferred pronouns." And I still have that shirt, and I haven't worn it in a few years because I've become uncomfortable with calling them preferred pronouns. Right. Because they're just my pronouns. They're not preferred. You can use those, or you can use ones that are wrong. That's right. It. So as you were doing that, I was thinking I should get that shirt out, and I should wear that shirt and just cross out preferred with the Sharpie and just wear that.
Just get a sticker that says "fucking" over preferred. Ask me my fucking pronouns.
Anyhow, I gotta say, Ari and I have done 62 episodes of The Sister Getting Out of Hand now. It used to seem like such a baby show, but now, first of all, it actually gets more Patreon than my other show that's been around for like 2 years longer. And I have to agree in that it has made me more bold, and it has given me that feeling that I should speak out more. Mostly because 1 hour a week, we have this space where we're not constantly stopping, apologizing, and defining. It's just this space where we can be ourselves and yell about shit without having to worry about what the cis think. And the cis people who are listening are already in on the joke. Like, we did a 2-part episode where we did nothing but make fun of them we did a literal roast, and people ate it up with a freaking spoon. It was great.
Yeah, I've been feeling a very, very like stark dichotomy of emotions lately, and not necessarily in the context of pride, but just sort of in life in general. It's really interesting because, as I came out, started the transition, and I, met more and more of the goals that I wanted. I got bottom surgery and hormones, presenting myself the way that I want to present, figuring out my style, all of that sort of stuff. Everything in my life improves, right? Because I am being more of my authentic self, and that's less and less pressure and more of the ability to just fucking live my life, right? And lately I feel like my mental health has kind of been on a roller coaster. And what's been distressing about it is, in the past, whenever I've felt depressed or whenever I felt anxious, almost universally, I can tie it back to a circumstance and say, like, there is this thing going on in my life that's making me feel this way, and these feelings are being amplified by all of the other stuff in my life that I feel isn't right. And so there is, even though those feelings are bad, there's a certain comfort in knowing, like, there's an explanation for the way that I'm feeling, and because there's an explanation for it, I know when those circumstances change, my feelings will most likely change with them. And lately, I've been sort of teeter-tottering back and forth between these like super euphoric highs and these super crushing lows, and there isn't really an explanation for it. And it's to the point where I've like, if this goes on a lot longer, I'm going to start going back to my therapist regularly and maybe start talking about medication, because it's really hard to describe, and it's like it seems completely disconnected from anything related to queerness or transness. Like it's just the way that my brain is starting to function. And it's disconcerting because I feel like I'm still unlearning a lot of bad ideas about mental health, that like, if you have these problems, you're going to have them, you will have had them forever. You don't develop them spontaneously in the middle of your life, which is not true, but that's a thing that we're kind of taught, that like, if you have this, you will have had it since forever, unless they're tied back to a specific trauma or something in your life. Like if you have depression, you have it from the time that you're able to feel emotions, right? And so that's been kind of disconcerting for me. And I've been trying really hard to navigate that and trying really hard to learn good coping mechanisms for it. And like I said, if it goes on for much longer, I probably will start going back to my therapist regularly, if not considering some sort of medication to even things out. But, objectively, if I look at the way my life is going, in so many ways, like my life is the best it's ever been. Like I'm being the realest I've ever been about who I actually am. I'm giving fewer fucks what anyone else has to say or think about it. Celeste and I's relationship is super strong. We're very, very good for each other. She got a new job that she's super, super happy about. I at least don't hate my job. I'm feeling really good about the episodes of the podcast that we're doing. I'm, getting more involved in things that are pleasurable for me, like, getting more involved with doing stuff with Star Trek and nerdy things, and taking more time for myself to watch TV shows that I want to watch and read books that I want to read. And so life has just been this really weird mix of things. And, a year or so after I came out, a friend of mine asked me, just like wanted me to check in, and was like, it's been a while since, you've been going through a lot. Just how you doing? And what I said to him was that, the good things in my life have gotten exponentially better, but the bad things have gotten worse too. So there's a wider dichotomy between the two. And at that point in my life, there were definitely more highs than lows. And I think that ratio is still true now, even though it's skewed a little bit more evenly between bad and good. And I think to me, that's still true. And, at the time I could trace it back to like, there's that thing that some trans folks go through where like dysphoria gets worse after you come out because you've accepted that like, okay, this is who I am and these are the things I want to do to transition. And like you've accepted those as things you want and need, and you see the difference between where you are and where you want to be. And you're kind of forced to look more starkly at that difference so it can kind of make things worse. That was the explanation for the bad stuff then. And now I think it's just mental health stuff, like generalized mental health stuff that's not really related to being queer or trans, at least not in a direct way. Maybe it's related to stress that I'm feeling that I'm not necessarily connecting with those things. But it's not something where I can directly relate to like, oh, here are these things in life I've been struggling with, therefore I feel this way. I've been, I mentioned this in like a monologue thing I did for the show a while back. I've been ruminating a lot on mortality, which I guess it's not inherently unhealthy, but I feel like I do it in kind of an unhealthy way because I get super anxious and like, I just think like, oh, I'm driving down the highway. Maybe I'll make it to work. Maybe I won't. We'll see what happens. Like, just weird, dark stuff like that. But then, I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, wow, that's the most connected to my reflection that I've ever felt, in that like I feel like I'm being the truest to who I really am that I have been in a long time. And I'm sure a lot of that's connected to having, the privilege to have had bottom surgery. And I've talked a lot about, how that's been more of a struggle than I expected it to be. But like, even in that context, it's a decision I would make again 100 times over because it's exponentially improved the quality of my life, and it's exponentially improved how happy I am with my body. And so, yeah, I've been in kind of a weird place lately, with like all of those things. And, with Pride in particular, I feel like I'm more in the middle of that conversation than I am a lot of other conversations. Like I usually fall pretty squarely on the side of like radical activism, throw bricks, break windows, make people in power uncomfortable, Mm-hmm. But like, I really see the side of this that's like, you know what? We deserve a fucking party. Like we deserve a day to be proud and unapologetic about who we are, to have fun and to celebrate the fact that we exist, you know, especially in the world that we live in. And so I'm like, maybe we can satisfy both of those things where we have like, today is party pride day and today is violent revolution pride day. Like maybe we do something like that. You know what I mean? And I definitely do have that. Like, I'm kind of looking sideways at all of the companies that are marching in pride parades. And I'm like, do your trans employees have proper health coverage? Like, do you give benefits? Did you give benefits to same-sex couples before gay marriage was the law of the land? Do you fire employees who mistreat trans people, like that kind of stuff? Like I definitely see things through that lens. Like, yeah, it's a party and we want you to come and we want you to have fun and we want you to be visible. But like the prerequisite for that is like, you actually have to be supporting us because at the end of the day, it's our fucking party. You know what I mean? Like, So yeah, I have lots of conflicting feelings, and I don't know if I'm going to go to Cincinnati Pride this year, mostly because we're moving that day, which was totally not planned. That's just like our lease ends 3 days after that Saturday, and we're like, oh, we'll move on that Saturday. And I posted an event, and somebody was like, oh, why did you have to make it the same day as Pride? And I'm like, because I wasn't thinking about that being a thing. Fuck. So I don't know, maybe go in the afternoon because I requested the day off. So like maybe if we get done moving soon enough, we can do the thing. But the So there's two big things around Pride that I saw in the post that I made that I thought was worth commenting on. And the first being members of the community who don't necessarily fit the stereotypical model of being like obviously queer, obviously trans. So bisexual or pansexual folks who are in relationships that look from the outside to be quote unquote normal heterosexual relationships, or hetero couples, but like one of the members of the relationship is a trans person, or asexual folks. Asexual inclusion is a big thing. And I think it's really, really sad that people don't feel like they have a place. I understand the impulse. Like, I get, like, it's supposed to be a queer party, and if you're not queer, but like, we can't make assumptions about whether or not somebody is queer by looking at the makeup of their relationships or by looking at the way they present themselves. And, for a community that prides itself on breaking outside of those boundaries, I think we could do with a lot more inner reflection on the way that we treat people based on the way that they look from the outside.
Yeah, I think the people who should be questioning a little bit whether they should go to Pride are straight allies. I'm not saying that they shouldn't go. I'm saying they should be thinking about it. Like, what is my purpose for going? What message does this give off? Will I be helping? Will I be harming? Will I be intruding into a space that is meant for people who have different experiences? It's really sad when people questioning whether or not they would be welcome are, queer people and trans people.
Yeah. I'd also, I doubt there's anybody listening to this show who's like, where's the month for straight people?
Yeah.
Right.
But I'm going to give the response that I wrote to the first person who said that on June fucking 1st, because my feed was just full of bullshit from everything. I identify as a Klingon. I identify as a couch cushion.
As a transformer.
Yeah.
God.
So clever. So I'm just going to write what I wrote to this person for anyone who still asks that question. Straight people don't need a month. They already have the entire society treating them as default. They never had to fight for anything. You don't have to come out as straight. You don't get bullied, beaten up, or killed for being straight. You don't have to worry about losing your home, family, or life for coming out as straight. You don't have laws being passed to discriminate against you because being straight is against someone's religion. You don't have laws being passed to keep you out of the bathroom for being straight. Your right to marry has existed for longer than 3 years of national law. Laws aren't being passed to make it illegal for you to adopt because you're straight. You don't have to consider where it might be safe for you to go in the country because you're visibly straight, and certain areas aren't safe for straight people. Nobody has ever murdered someone and gotten away with it because of straight panic.
Absolutely. And my final thought along the lines of what Ari was saying is I was thinking about this because there are a couple of people who have approached me and asked me what an ally's place in Pride is and whether or not they should, go to Pride events and that kind of thing. And like Ari said, I actually appreciate that people are thinking about that. And, am I taking up space where I don't belong? And so, in the context of Pride as a party, my thought is like, act the way you act when you go to someone else's birthday party. Like, you are
Don't
invited.
Open their fucking presents.
Right. Like you are invited, so you're wanted, and we want you to have fun. We want you to participate, but understand that it's not your party. It's not about you, right? Understand that it is for and about queer and trans people for very specific reasons. Whether we think that Pride is supposed to be about violent revolution, or we think it should be a party where we celebrate and proclaim our existence. The context is we live in a society that tries to suppress who we are and tries to tell us that who we are is wrong, that at best we should be pushed to the side, and at worst we shouldn't exist. And that context has to be remembered by anyone who's not a member of the community but wants to participate. And as long as you're coming from that context, I'm good with it. Come to the party and hang out and have fun. But like, don't be that person who's like, oh my gosh, they're dancing in leather underwear and that makes me uncomfortable. Or like, there are women kissing women and I'm not sure how I feel. Like, don't be that person.
I'm an ally, so I'm like basically an honorary queer.
Yes.
If you're not nice to me, I'm going to go join the alt-right.
Appreciate me. God. All right. Well, Marissa, it is always fun having you on and hanging out, and we're gonna have to make plans to get up there.
Come visit me.
Yes, because that all of the stuff you said sounds wonderful, but even if it was just for you and the folks in your house, it would be worth it. So thanks again. You had more. Go ahead.
Just a note. I kind of wrote my own "If You're Lost, If You're Hurting" thing. I'd like to include it at the end if that's okay.
100%. Absolutely. Cool. So we'll have I'll do my thing, and then Ari will do their thing, and then you do your thing, and then I'll do my thing.
Cool.
Sounds like a plan. All right. Well, one more time. The book is
Once Unspoken, a series of monologues from the previously unheard. It is available at Amazon or rissmccool.com, and I will also include a direct link to buy it through PayPal, in which I will send out a signed copy.
Yes. So if you're listening and that sounds interesting to you, look in the show notes for the episode because the link will be there. That, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto. If you think what we do here is important, please share this around to your friends. Search the Gaytheist Manifesto on Facebook and Twitter to find us there. I'm at Gaytheist Callie on Twitter. You can email us at podcast@thegaytheistmanifesto.com. We are a part of the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative. We're a group of trans podcasting badasses working to bring more trans voices into podcasting and other content creation. Search for the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative on Facebook for more info. And does Ari have a thing?
I've got some more tips for our allies. Got a lot of allies asking, what can I do in Pride Month? So I've got a list of do's and don'ts.
I'm so excited.
Let's start with the don'ts. Don't throw a fit over your bruised ego on a trans person's very gently worded post about how allies should be careful to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. Don't act like the post was specifically a personal attack on you when the poster doesn't even know you. Don't be verbally aggressive and then deny that you were ever confrontational. Don't spam that person's post with comments despite being told the conversation needs to move to Messenger. Don't continue to spam comments after 3 fucking warnings. Don't video call the poster without their permission. And finally, don't accuse the poster of copping out when they don't answer the call and request text communication, despite them telling you up front that they're busy right now and can't talk. Here's what you should do.
Not that that's a thing that happened, by the way. Not that that's a specific thing that happened, but
yeah, any resemblance to real life events is just coincidental. Shut the fuck up. That's all I got. And if you want to bitch about it, you can friend me on Facebook at Ari Stillman. Email me at aristillman4@gmail.com. I guess you can listen to the SJW Circle Jerk. What the fuck ever. You know, you're cis. You're awful. That's probably why you're doing that. And if you want to hear more about this, listen to the Cis Are Getting Out of Hand podcast. And I'm sure that the next episode is going to talk about this a little bit more.
Oh, Ari, I fucking love you. I just desperately need you to know that. If you want to support the show and the activism we do, you can head to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto, make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. And if you can't do that, you can still give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and share us around to your friends. It all helps and it all makes a difference. Rissy, do your thing.
Okay, I've been saying this since the end of episode 140 of the Inciting Incident podcast, but given that you're the reason that I started even considering coming out, I felt like it was appropriate to share here.
I like that.
I don't care if you came out at 5 or 50. I don't care if people think you pass or not. I don't care if you changed your name and or pronouns or not. I don't care if you redefined your orientation or not. I don't care if you're out to the world or even just me because you messaged me to come out, which happens at least once a week. You, my fellow trans person, deserve to have your name, identity, and well-being respected. You do not deserve to be shamed, harmed, or put in danger in any way, nor do you deserve gatekeeping from other trans people who can't see past their own experience. I see you. I love you. You are valid. Also, TERFs can go suck a fuck.
Out fucking standing. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things, and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Till next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.
And also all the people who want to come to Pride and hold up posters that say, like, Jesus loves you anyway. No, fuck off. Go, don't do that. We don't like religion. The end. Yeah.